The one option, of course, is to take possession of both the property, to take possession of everything, except as is. They transfer the land to us, and we take it. To any of you that I've talked to over the last month, as this item has kind of been bounced around a little bit, will know I have already thrown around that my recommendation to the council, if this would take place, and this is what the council wants to do, would be to move the rock and sell the property as commercial property. Over the years, I've not been a supporter of the city expanding its non-taxable property base and its maintenance base. So, however, there are some major logistical issues to doing that if we went that route, and that is, of course, the ability to logistically move and financially want to move the rock, and then, of course, any potential damage that might occur to the rock as a result of that. Another option, of course, would be to outright reject the offer of transferring the property and taking possession of the rock. And then a third option could be potentially counter-offering with him with the obstacles that we would potentially be interested in taking the rock and maybe any of the accessory items. I think I mentioned directly the flagpoles and the paperwork. However, from a logistics standpoint, that wouldn't occur until, even if they were to accept that option, that would not occur until at least spring. And once again, you have the same risk associated with my other recommendation if we take possession of the property. Of course, Ross indicated to me that his primary desire is to see the city take possession and maintain that property for the Freedom Rock location. So that is kind of just the start of the discussion. Does anyone have any questions, comments that they want to have on this issue? Based on what's been going on over the last few months, I think this initially started, and maybe our friends in Chamber might know a little bit more than we do. I think this initially started with them trying to find a shelter organization to make the rock a tax deductible donation entity.
Right, it doesn't qualify for any grants or anything, and that's been part of the problem. Also, the perception from the community that it's a private property, and therefore a lot of the civic organizations aren't interested in doing anything with it because it belongs to some.
Yeah. And so I know at first they were just simply looking for a shelter organization. I think based on what Ross was saying to me late last week, it sounds like to me now what they're really looking for is they would like to have some input, I think, in the future, but for the most part, they're looking at a full transfer of ownership.
So were there strings attached to the transfer?
Well, I suggested to Ross that most likely my recommendation to the council would be that we would only, if we would accept it, we would accept it with no standing circumstances. Sorry, I'm still half asleep. So, no standing circumstances. So, and that doesn't say that the council can't, but that would be my recommendation to you. And I'm sure in a little bit of conversation I have with Colin, I think Colin can feel the same.
Has the debt to MGM, which I believe from Community Foundation Materials was around $3,000, has that been satisfied?
I am not. You might see I actually referenced that in here. I'm not aware of whether or not that has been resolved yet or not. Of course, I would say we'd make it quite clear to any party involved in it that we wouldn't be assuming any debt associated with the existing project or property.
Last thing I heard was she had talked about applying for a Macy loan scheme. So, since it still wasn't technically a commercial property. But I don't believe that's happened.
Right.
So that was probably a month ago.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
And if the property changes hands, you could then not be able to lien against the property. But of course, prior to the transfer, you could technically put a construction lien against the property as long as it's still in the same ownership hands. But that's going kind of far down the rabbit hole at this point. Ross's intent was to really see this resolved by the end of the year. I really honestly believe that unless we're choosing one of two options, that's not really possible. unless our option, our approach tomorrow night, if we take action tomorrow night, is either to reject it in full or to accept it and possess it and keep it there in full. I think any other option will delay this beyond the beginning of the year. It's just not enough time. As you all know, this was put together late last week as a result of this being approached. So it's all just kind of, at this point, just moving in this direction. But it is on your agenda tomorrow night. I'm between today and tomorrow. I plan to talk to Mr. Mevenberg and find out the status of the MGM bill. But based on what Bobby said, it sounds like to me it's still outstanding. What's Chambers going on this, since we got so many of the officers in the room?
Chambers sort of started the whole, well, he sort of started it all in committee. The design committee is the one that took the project on. Of course, when it initially started, and I won't speak for the chamber itself, but I'll speak for myself as a veteran. Okay? I'd rather do that because I would hate, first of all, I would hate to see the rock moved, honestly. I think it's in a great position. It's right there where it needs to be. I think it's in a significant landmark. I believe in the future it becomes more important as the 99 counties come on board, and there's a map to visit every Freedom Rock in the state. I think that creates, interest in our community, which we never want to squelch that. I think there are still a lot of veterans around. I think that people have a fondness in their heart for those kinds of things. I would hate to see it damaged. We spend a lot of time, a lot of money to make that happen. People gave very freely in the beginning, and then the whole issue came up of the personal property thing, which really did a disservice to the purpose of the whole project. It was never intended to be any kind of a money-making position. It was never intended for any of those things. It was only intended to be something that would go to the community and be part of the community. So as a veteran, I would hate to see it moved. I'd hate to see the property, that property on Main Street look like crap before it ever happened there, and continue to look like crap no matter what. At least we have something there that's representative of the people in the county, and in the city. So I think it's a great landmark. I think it brings people to town to look at it. You see people stopping there all the time. So on the chamber side, I think it brings people to the community. We never want to see that go away. It's an economic incentive for people to stop here, to get off the highway and come see what's here. And it's something that means something to veterans because it does depict stories of people that live here.
Have they approached like the VFW or anybody to?
I understand that the VFW has turned them down.
How about the county organization, within the courthouse that handles Veterans Affairs? Is that?
Peg Detman's group, I'm not familiar with whether or not.
They were
Peg's
part of
group
the
is-
original organization that helped find people to support getting the rock, moving the rock with the chamber. So after the chamber did the initial work, they did a big part in that. But I don't think they're in a position to take on, with the staff that they have for maintenance and stuff, the county. I don't think they're in a position to be able to take in other projects. So you'd have to talk to county board supervisors, but I don't know that that's been approached either.
Well, and not meant to insult, but I know Ross did say in our conversation that they offered to continue to maintain the property, but to be all honest, I haven't been impressed with the maintenance of the property up to this point. So
Better than it was.
that is true.
So it looks like at this point, basically, we have two options, would be to accept or reject the property. And I suppose we could do a third one and try and do some kind of negotiations with it, but I mean,
There are also 2 more flagpoles that have already been purchased for service flags, the Army and the Marine Corps. Both have purchased, and the flags and the flagpoles.
Well, I did talk to Ross if we did entertain the idea of moving anything, what would that mean? The flagpoles themselves are movable, however, the bases they're in are not. So, as I point out in here, you have to take into consideration that if we did take it with the intent of moving it, you do have not only the risk of damage, but you have the cost associated with that.
Yeah, and that wasn't cheap.
I spent quite a bit of time talking with Randy Ripley
It's expensive,
on
yeah.
Friday. I think it was Thursday night or Friday night, I can't remember now. And we talked about the logistics of moving it. And she didn't believe, being the one that kind of coordinated moving it last time, she didn't believe that there was any potential way of moving it that you wouldn't damage the rock.
The way it has to be lifted and all that.
Yeah. She thought it could be moved, but she said she didn't see any way you could do it without damaging the surface of the rock. You're not intended to come to a decision, as you know, these things aren't about coming to decisions. They're about asking questions. They're about working towards getting answers, about thinking through it to some degree.
So you have $1,000 figure in here if you're looking at moving it. Was that an estimate or is that just a guesstimate?
That was probably as much a guesstimate as anything else. It was only a few days in place. It had more to do with determining what you're looking at from the standpoint of getting a company to come over here. And there's companies willing to volunteer some time, volunteer some equipment, but Brandy felt that $1,000 was a safe estimate. Not to mention, even if your costs aren't that high, you could also potentially look at getting they do offer insurance for those type of activities. So, I mean, if you're concerned about the surface being damaged and it needing to be repainted, there may be the potential of buying, if it's going to cost you $5,000 to have it resurfaced and you buy an insurance, say, for $1,000, yeah, that's hard money to spend on something that's a maybe, but if you do damage it, not paying that other $4,000 would probably be pretty nice. But assuming you could even get insurance for that type of scenario, that could be another potential use of that money.
Basically, there are two main reasons for wanting to move it: is the preservation of the rock and qualifying for grants improvements. That's how this whole thing got started.
Yes. As far as,
Why they want the city to take it over?
I think
Is
they
that the
wanted,
whole reason? That,
my impression, and maybe I'm wrong here, my impression is they want to take it over because they're ready for another entity to take possession of the property or take possession of the entity.
That was always, just for information, that was always their intention, from the beginning. From the beginning, the intention was always for the property to go and be donated.
This new program that we're looking at, this Hometown Pride program, is there any kind of grants or anything that we could use for that?
It would qualify as vertical infrastructure, but of course, they don't cover maintenance or upkeep type of cost, which...
How much would that be, Adam? I'm just curious.
Well,
There is utilities and water going to that building.
You've got the utility, you got some upfront costs, potential upfront costs, and then you have some long-term costs. Your long-term cost is, of course, the time and cost associated with maintaining the property, weeding, mowing it, spraying it. You've got the insurance that we now have to cover on it that we
On the
now have
property
to
for
carry.
liability.
Yeah, you have, then you have some potential upfront costs. The building's basically an empty hole. Are you going to do something with the building? You have the cost associated with doing something with the building. Because if you're going to have the utility cost as well, you're likely going to have to do something to the inside of the building in order for that utility cost to even come into play. So
So the way it stands right now, it would just be the maintenance, mowing, weeding, spraying, insurance. And what is that? Do you know? Any idea?
No.
I just wondered what it would cost a year to take care of it.
Yeah, Curtis.
Did they hand over any kind of plans to you for what it would look like in its final stage?
No.
So you don't have any idea how much it would cost to finish the project?
No.
Have you got a quote yet on how much it would cost to knock that building down?
No. As small as the building is, we could almost do that ourselves.
Okay. And without asbestos.
Yeah.
Understand that people and organizations gave money and time into that building,
Yeah.
donated it to the Freedom Rock. So just be
Yeah,
aware.
that's the other lingering
I'm not saying don't
element.
do it, but just be aware, there'll be some people who aren't happy about that.
And Bobby brings up a good point. Another element of this that makes this kind of an odd duck is that there has now been a significant amount of money put towards not only the rock itself, but the property
The
itself,
property itself.
in the name of the rock.
New
And
windows,
so-
new door, new roof, drywall, all those things have been put in there.
Maybe they'd be better off to approach Peggy Detman and the veterans.
It would be the county, not the the
County.
veterans wouldn't be able to, the organization itself wouldn't do anything. It would have to be the county board of supervisors who would take it on.
If they approach Peggy, maybe Peggy would go with them to Orange County. Might be a better option.
Well, at this point, unless anybody else has any other questions or comments, this is on the council agenda once again, tomorrow night.
Maybe one more. Do you have any idea how many of these rocks that are being put on are actually on private property?
Very few of them. Actually, I've seen it anything as far as an expensive outlay. I ran across a couple that are just a rock sitting in a common area
If
with
you've been to Rolfe, there's,
no fan.
is, Pocahontas County is on private property.
Okay.
I think there's just a couple.
I think Kevin's got.
Yeah, I'm gonna say there's only like 2 or 3 in the state that he's done.
I will tell you, West Bend has one, and it's kind of just at a, I mean, if you didn't know it was a Freedom Rock, you
Yeah, you
wouldn't know
wouldn't
it's there. There's also one up in northeastern Iowa I've gone by. I mean, it didn't have any fanfare with it either. So you see varying degrees. I think both of those were on public property. It wasn't clear by just passing them, but I've seen anything from something extensive like what Fort Dodge is looking at doing to
There's some that are bricked in whole huge areas, and they have all these, literally 20 flagpoles up. And I mean, I saw pictures during the Freedom Rock ceremony from people who came from different counties of what their Freedom Rock were. Some of them were very elaborate.
Did you have a question?
You guys were talking about the possibility of moving the rock as an example of a place where it could be moved, the fountain by the city building. Is there enough on-street parking there to accommodate 2 or 3 cars at a time?
Not currently, no. Now, right across the road where it kind of lips into the park, there's quite a bit of extra area in that area. And then, you could probably set something up from that standpoint over there. But as of right now, no, there is not a set up amount of parking spots within almost a reasonable scenario.
I think, Ross and Denise have done a lot of good things for the community in terms of some wonderful ideas. Sometimes the follow-through hasn't been the greatest, the ideas. It's hard to impugn the ideas. Unfortunately, I think we're a little bit trapped in there's so many emotional things. As Bobby was saying, there's an emotional attachment to the rock. If we accept it,
Well, I think it's in a really good location right now too. It fits with that area.
if we accept it, there are ramifications. If we don't accept it, there are ramifications. It's a bit of a catch-22 in some regard. For the community foundation, it made perfect sense to not accept it because it's not within keeping of the mission of a foundation to be
Yeah,
maintaining.
you guys don't really keep stuff.
We keep stocks, we keep investments, we
Yeah, you
don't
keep the
keep
property.
things. The city can't necessarily say that, but that being said, there's a downside to taking it too. I think we do have to be careful and say that, look at the property and not any past history with it, and look to the future and say, what is right for the city, and, but do we want to have to pay, do I want going to have an outlay of $20,000 out of our budget that we're looking at right now if we're gonna try and finish the project. I don't think we've got it to do it either.
I think Chris's suggestion of approaching the county would be a good, thing to at least try.
Because really technically, it is supposed to be a county rock.
Well, and if you look, the property is adjacent to both a city park and a county park. It's, of course, it's Monday morning quarterback at this point, but it's unfortunate it wasn't arranged to be put in a different location to begin with.
Well, like I say, we can't look back. All we can do is look forward. And, looking at, if the county will take it, I mean, has the county been approached? I know that the letter that was sent to the Community Foundation, the Opsals indicated the county had turned it down. But it also indicated the city had turned it down, and I don't think it had been offered to us. So, I mean,
No, the only place it had been, we'd been approached about was the Winchell property that we took possession of. That's the only property that we'd been asked about. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll move on to the next item. The next item is the chamber director issue. And you guys, this is really meant to be kind of an informal type of process, so if you want to jump in at any time and talk, you're welcome to do so. It's not really meant to be a formal process. There have been some conversations between representatives of the city and representatives of the chamber about the future of the director position. Right now, the director position, how many official hours? Actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about you know better than I do, the current position.
The current position's 30 hours. We're advertising for someone that's gonna, we used to say 25 to 30. That's fooling herself. She spent a lot more than 30 hours there. We also required her to volunteer some hours, so she basically worked full-time for part-time pay and no benefits. So, which sucks, let's be honest. That's a lot of work.
My understanding is the salary was $21,000 a year, is that
It was
roughly?
20, just over $20,500 is
Okay.
what she got with her current raise.
So my numbers there are just slightly off because I was using 21,000 and
And our
adding the FICA number.
And our
to it.
current budget is 5,000 more than last year. Last year was 45,000, and this year is 50,000.
Okay.
That's our
Right.
goal for investment and all of that. That's
And you-
5,000 more than last year.
And you can see that I was basing it on roughly 60 to 65,000, so that's considerably more than one.
But it is a 30-hour position. 25 hours of that is required to be Main Street, which means 25 hours of that position would have to be dedicated to Chamber and Main Street.
And under the Main Street program, the office, the position needs to be housed
Within the district, which means it would have to stay where it is or move somewhere downtown.
Because in previous years, when this item would be kicked around a little bit, one of the things that would come up is the potential of moving the position to the city office in the little, in the council chamber room, that little office in the corner.
To save money, but that won't work because it's not in the district.
Yeah, it's outside the district. So, just in case you're wondering, I didn't include that in here, I thought I'd bring it up in the conversation. You've got I could have wrote probably 15 different options on this item, but, I figured at this point, we're just simply at the discussion level. As of right now, the Finance Committee has had this and has heard some of this, and they felt, in the last discussion of the Finance Committee, they felt it was time that the rest of the council start to hear pieces of this and start to get some feedback from them and ask them some questions and comments. In our last conversation with Bobby, one idea that got thrown around was kind of a convoluted idea, so hopefully you can follow me in this process a little bit. Right now, the city gives $12,500 to Chamber. And what the idea was here is that instead of Chamber employing a director, the city would hire an economic development director. It would be a full-time position with full city benefits. Well, how does that work out? Well, what we looked at doing is the position would be about a $30,000 a year position with benefits. To do that and to pencil in the numbers, right now the city's giving Chamber $12,500. We would end that support to Chamber. There would never be that transfer. On top of that, the city would look at receiving some kind of remuneration from Chamber for the cost associated with using the services of a city employee. And of course, the numbers talked about that day were about $5,000 was what was thrown out. Trying to think, sorry, my head's still a little fuzzy and there's a lot of numbers in this one. As far as the benefits element of this goes, the FICA, the IHRS, and the health insurance benefits that are being provided, those are budget neutral when it comes to the city because those are a direct pass on to property taxes. You are allowed to tax whatever is necessary for the collection of those costs. So that would be directly passed on to the property tax paying population. So that would be budget neutral on that side of things. So in the end, I think we came down to a discussion that the increased, in order to provide that level of an employee, you would be in a situation where the city's portion of that increased out of general fund proportion of that would be in the neighborhood of between $9,000 and $12,000 a year.
Between 9 and 10.
9 and 12.
And we tried some other scenarios initially, but with the city just employing that person part-time, by the time the person paid the additional money required for all the benefits and everything, they wouldn't get a paycheck, basically. So that's how we sort of worked through and came to the, well, what about the 12.5? It comes from the general fund. Could that be, because we use that towards salary, could that go back to the city to make it easier to figure it out? But, so we sort of went through a bunch of evolution and then came out with this at the end.
Now there's some advantages and some distinct disadvantages to this option. One advantage from the city's perspective, and close your ears, Chamber, is that we would set the goals and responsibilities of the position. I mean, it's a city employee. The city would dictate the priorities of the position. However, the one element of the position that would really have to be worked out is how the interaction between them doing duties specifically directed towards the chamber and not more of the community as a whole would be kind of where it gets a little weird, like fundraising. When they would be doing fundraising for the chamber, how would that, how much time do they spend on that? How does that work out? That would be one of the parts of discussion. Yes, Curtis?
I was just, you sort of rambled your way into the answer of what I was going to ask.
Oh, okay.
Just if there was going to be, how they would interact with the chamber, if there would still be a chamber, that kind of thing.
Well,
If the council would appoint a board to support them rather than it being a private board to support them.
Well, to be all honest, this idea has been kicked around for a while. It is similar in setup to what Pocahontas did a few years ago. In fact, I initially talked with the city administrator of Pocahontas about this about 2 years ago. So this is something that's not like we just came up out of nowhere about it. And I asked him what kind of pitfalls they ran into, where it succeeded, where it hasn't succeeded. One of the concerns that was approached in the discussion, and this is more of Chambers, a concern Chambers should be aware of than us, is that there was concern about the donation levels to Chambers, primarily for two reasons. One, if your members see that a portion of your money is actually going to the city to pay for the services of the position, some of them may not particularly feel comfortable with that or feel like that's politically a responsible move. And that's something I can't answer. And then, yes?
Is that how Pocahontas works? Is the first if it's 30,000, is the first 30,000 donations for the position, and then it starts being?
No, the way it would work, this position is paid for by the city. What we would simply do is say, okay, Chamber, in review of your services that you're going to receive on an annual basis, you pay, and I'll just use 6,000 as an easy number because it breaks down easy. $500 a month would go towards paying the city for the use of our services. It would be not a whole lot different, and of course, I hate to use this comparison, but it's a quick one that comes to mind. The city, when we're painting street lines, we also provide a service to commercial businesses. We'll paint their handicap spots and things of that nature. The public pays for it, and then we bill the city for those services we provide. This would be very similar. Basically, Chamber would be billed and pay for the services that are being provided on behalf of the city. So that's kind of how that works. I forgot, where was I?
So how much of a savings would it really be to the chamber in the end?
A couple of, if we went, for instance, with the model that's kind of thrown around, Chamber would end up with a couple extra $1,000, actually more than they have today.
If the investment levels were the same.
Absolutely. There's a little bit of buffer built in there with the assumption that would possibly
Possibly
change.
go down.
You know, one element of this that needs to be discussed is if we did go this route, you know, what our desire in the position would be and how that might, the amount of hours we want them to put into that might conflict with the amount of hours necessary to support the chamber-related activities too. There's framework here that has to be worked out. I'm not intended to sit here and say all this is in place. And you might see another option I put in here, which is a real simple option for us, is just throwing money at the problem, and that is if we want them to have a full-time position and we want to see them pay more for the position so that, you know, they potentially get higher quality applicants, we can throw money at Chamber and walk away from it. But understand, if we go that route, this is mostly about the benefits, I believe, for the most part. More than the salary, it's about
We're
the
never going to
benefits.
be able to pay for benefits.
And-
One employee,
There's no way to cut around this, that the position could benefit from the city's benefits without it being a city position. And so that's the reason why in the end, this was kind of thrown out the way it was. If we throw money at Chamber to deal with the issue and to help them in that process, it would all 100% come out of the general fund. We'd be taking it away from other departments. So that's one of the elements of looking at this and how that works. Of course, just like with the rock option, another option here is that we smile and say thank you, and here's your $12,500 figure your problem out. I mean, that is that is inevitably an option that the other council can go. The difficult element here is Chamber needs a direction soon. And the problem is that even if the city wants to put this type of thing into place, in order for it to be covered by incoming revenues, we can't have it covered by incoming revenues till July 1st. So that's...
So we basically voted at Chamber to wait and see what you guys do. We did get a couple applications, but we delayed in doing any interviews because we wanted to see where this would go. And basically, the Chamber Board is maintaining the Chamber at this point by all of us doing some part of the normal stuff. It doesn't get you anything fancy, but at least gets you out of the normal day-to-day things still going on. So once the summer comes, that's almost impossible because that's the big time. Once we start the expo in late April or early May, from then on, it's all about the events that happen monthly. And that really takes a lot of time for the director.
Did you have a question, Chris?
Well, I'm wondering how the open meetings and open records laws interact with this position if it becomes a city
The
position.
position itself would be fully open. Well, there are some caveats as far as you know, as like
Sure.
business perspective, business prospects. However, the
What-
salary of the individual, the interactions with them and the council, their goals and objectives set by the city council would all be public record. Their expenditures would be public record.
Would they be able to meet with a private board
Oh,
and
yeah.
not have that be subject to
Oh,
open
yeah.
meetings laws?
Oh, yeah.
So if you guys didn't appoint a board to support them, they would be able to meet with the board privately.
But you're thinking the city appointing the board?
What I'm saying is, right now there's a chamber.
Yes.
There's a chamber board. If they were interacting with that board in a meeting and being given direction by that board as a city employee, would that meeting be subject to open meetings laws?
To be perfectly honest, it'd be better for us to check with the state. I don't think so, Curtis, on the surface. I don't think so, but,
Because I know if you guys were the ones that appointed the board to support her, then it would be.
and that's why I asked.
And that would be the ideal situation,
Yeah.
because it's tax money paying this position.
Okay, guys, first question I have, I mean, if we're looking at somebody as an economic development person, chamber director, $30,000 a year is about $14.40 an hour. Is that a sufficient salary to get someone who would be sufficiently gifted to really make an economic impact?
From the things that I've seen from Main Street where it's shared positions, it's reasonable, yes. Where it's a shared position. It goes from there up.
How many other towns, Bobby,
Yeah.
have shared positions?
I'm trying to think.
It's not as
Very
common.
few,
as you would
very
think.
few. It's
Yeah,
not,
it's
it's
a
not an
handful.
obvious situation.
Yeah.
Pocahontas has that. Carroll's is kind of odd. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not actually shared, but it is
Right.
in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that the problem is that we have in small town Iowa, and basically, let's look at west of I-35, every Main Street community, you know, we gotta differentiate Chamber and Main Street.
Two different things.
When you throw in the Main Street entity, that's where all of these strings come attached with time and reports and all this other stuff. That's where a lot of this goes. Where a lot of places where you see a shared economic development coordinator and a chamber director, they don't have those strings. Chamber is events,
Probably the more common.
you know?
Probably the more common mix you see is county and chamber
That's right.
interact. You
Right.
know, interlinked rather than the city and chamber interlinked. That's probably the more common practice.
And you're seeing this,
Not only
chambers are
sharing,
growing,
but-
chambers are county entities, like the Growth
Great
Alliance in Webster County. What's it called in BV County? Something about the Great Lakes, something. You know, where we're looking at a area complex. I know that was a goal that I had when I was chamber president, was maybe unite the community clubs and things like that in our county. Well, at that time, we had problems enough with the rock to get it here that year.
So,
We're kind of at a crossroads, and I don't know how many people of the council know this, but this position has started conversations, what now, Adam? 2.5 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
We started this?
so there's a 25-hour requirement for Main
Main
Street.
Street.
So we're looking at a 40-hour position, and from what I'm hearing, the events coordinators, the events coordinator type stuff, does that count as the Main Street hours or not?
Yes. Almost everything she does counts as Main Street.
Main
hours.
Street hours, yes.
It does, that's the thing. It's the same. I know Chamber and Main Street are different. It's the same, it's what they're doing is the same thing. Main Street requires, Main Street gives it structure, gives us an opportunity for training for the individual, gives a network for that person to work with, that you don't get if you're just a chamber, honestly. It gives you structure, it gives you, that person an opportunity to learn and grow, which is always a benefit when you're offering a position like
Well,
that.
another benefit to the Main Street program too, and this is whether they admit it or not, certain grants are influenced.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. We wouldn't have
Statutes and
the CDBG grant, we wouldn't have, the facade. We
Main
would-
Street's a definite positive.
It's a definite positive. So you give that up. yeah, the 25-hour requirement goes away, but all those functions are still there. The only thing you lose are the reports you send to Main Street, a monthly report and then now an end-of-year report. So basically, and a requirement for 4 trainings a year that are mandatory.
Well, I guess as Adam said, it's early in the morning for my brain to be doing math, but, so there's a 25-hour requirement, which is fine. We're saying that the 30 hours didn't meet the position now, and yet we're talking about maybe trying to add some economic development on top of that within a 40-hour framework. I guess I'm wondering,
It's gonna be done, yeah.
Is this feasible?
You know, we're not gonna have an ideal position where we're gonna have plenty of time, you know, devoted towards economic development. It's gonna be, you know, a compromise to some extent. You know, we have one common denominator, and that's to see Sac City thrive. I think that's true of both the city and the chamber. Our key, you know, to this whole thing is how do we do and, you know, go about that. You know, a couple of things to consider right now. We have, you know, we give money, we have no say in the chamber. Question is do we want that say? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. You know,
Currently, we do have a representative of your council on the board, they just don't have, they're an ex officio member.
They don't vote.
you know, and look at it this way too. We're in a situation, I think both organizations want to dwindling, you know, resources. How do we best, you know, put the two together is, you know, we're looking at long-term of how to make Sac City, you know, best economically to thrive. You know, with both organizations with dwindling resources,
And a lot
we
of
have to look
the-
at the synergy possibly.
A lot of the things that the chamber does are in that direction. I mean, the whole mission states that we're there to improve the economic viability of the community. I mean, that's one of the missions of the chamber. So that, I mean, it goes along with that economic development. So I think a lot of things cross over in that. There's some specific things, goals that you all would have for that person. So that would be in addition to that. But one of the things that is our goal is to improve the economics of Sac City. So.
You had a question or comment?
I was just going to say that there is a lot of overlap within the economic development aspect of that. The Business Improvement Committee, in reality, is an economic development type of committee within the chamber there. Much like the SDC is an economic development entity within that the city does have a member of and everything. So there's a lot of overlap within that economic development framework that you're talking about there.
I mean, there's SATD, there's SBC, there's BI, there's the chamber itself, there's, and as many individuals as talk to people. I think everybody has the best interest of the city at heart. I would like to hope that all of us in this room have the best interest of the city at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And as Bill says, you know, we have to figure out how to get there. Just back at back at my fuzzy math brain this morning. So we have 12.5 and we get, that we're giving now, we would get, if we say 6,000 back from the chamber, that's 18.5. So that's
And you're talking about a position that cost roughly,
30 grand. So you're talking, so you were saying 9 to 12. So we're a whole lot closer to 12 than we are to 9.
yeah. You know, the other thing, just in comments, if you look at what our outlays on an annual basis are, we have about $18,000 we're handing out to entities that are focused on economic development related activities, whether it be SDC, whether it be chamber, whether it be SETD. There's about $18,000 going out the door to those organizations.
And then with the hometown pride, that's putting it close to 20.
Yeah.
Which is is not really maybe economic
I was gonna
development.
say, I
It's
don't
there.
know.
But
Yes,
it-
Curtis.
It sounds a lot like with the chamber director spending more than 30 hours a week doing chamber business. It sounds a lot like the city just paying for a chamber director and still being directed by the chamber. I mean, how many hours would be left for economic development each week? 5, if she works 35 a week?
Well, we talked about that. The summertime is when, from the time we start events, because the events, and the events are not only chamber, the events affect the entire city. In the summertime, the requirements go up because the events are, they're volunteer driven. Let's all admit that the volunteer force is not what it used to be. It's very difficult. So the people who are on the chamber board end up doing a lot of the work that's involved. We have a little core of people that come and help, and it's usually the same people over and over again. So the director is left with leading up to the event, it's going to take a lot of time for the person to get ready for that event. It's just the way life is when you do have a volunteer force. But there are other times when we are from after Porktoberfest until we get to the expo, that literally we're doing things like the Avenue of Lights. That, you know, that took a very minimal amount of time. Just the monthly things that they have to do and are involved in chamber coffees and those kind of things. But literally, those months are what we call our slow months, where you can work on other projects other than what those events, because we're very event driven in the summertime. So, like I said, it would be a roller coaster. During the summertime, it would be very difficult to carve out more hours. The other times, you have more hours than those other hours because there are less things going on the chamber side. So,
What are Brady's hours like in December? Every week?
literally, right now, I'm taking care of everything in the office between I and Chloe pretty much for a couple hours.
Let's say 2013. Was she working 10 hours a week?
No, she still put in her 25
Right.
hours. We find other things to do, so.
That's
she still
when you
put her
could do your
25 hours
business with
in.
your businesses.
Exactly.
Things of that nature.
I mean, it's just like any normal job. You're gonna have
Yeah.
different stuff, different times of the year that
Times
you
of the
focus
year.
on.
So,
But it would be, no.
she still worked 25 hours.
Basically, it
because
would be
that's
a
what the
wash
job
is what
was.
Bobby's getting at between
Yeah.
summer and
In
winter.
winter.
How much she could focus on economic development part would be more in the winter time. In the
Yeah, that's
summertime, it
really
would be
what I'm
more
saying.
community events is what you're
Exactly,
saying.
yeah.
The percentages would actually reverse.
It would be a
50,
It would be
50-50.
the opposite, exactly.
Right.
That's what I'm
That's
saying,
okay.
is that
Okay.
you would end up with more time in-
25
from
hours during
October
full-time for
on.
development.
Exactly, so, and because you all need to know honestly what goes on, so really it would be, in the summertime, I want everybody to know, it really is very chamber focused because of the event schedule that we have. You can't do events in the wintertime, it just doesn't work. People don't want to come out, so from October until May, there would be more economic time than there would be in the summertime from May until October.
So I guess another likely scenario, I really should have probably spent a little time discussing on this, and since we've been talking up there, I was thinking maybe I should have included it, is the idea we're talking about the county and about the potential of sharing the position. I don't know how Chloe feels about that. That'd be more interesting with the board, but not that big, Chloe. Sorry, Chloe. But I mean, that would be another potential reasonable option. I really didn't even do an analysis for, so. Yeah.
Would you as a board be going into this with a clear definition of what economic development is? And how that is different from the chamber's event planner?
That would have to be established as we're putting the framework of this together.
Prior to
I
accepting.
think one thing that would have to be worked out as this arrangement would be put into place would be a clear identity of what's expected out of the position. I
We
think-
talked about that.
Yeah,
yeah.
'cause
There
otherwise,
has
I
to
think
be,
We
yeah.
want to specify a job description.
I mean,
definitely.
yeah, regardless, if we went with just the option where it was a city employee, I think that between chamber and the city, there would have to be some hard talks about making sure that we try to overcome those obstacles before they ever come. if it was.
You don't want that person to be caught in the middle.
If it was shared between the city and the county, or the county and chamber, or something, I would say that would need to be done as well, because I think anytime you have a lot of chiefs and one Indian, you're going to have a scenario where,
That person's gonna be put at a disadvantage if it isn't.
they're gonna get pulled in a lot of different directions and need to be given the opportunity to know up front what's expected out of them.
That's kind of one.
Because I don't want to set anyone up to fail, and I would be afraid that's what we would
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, and I think one thing we have to keep in mind too, like Bobby had mentioned before, and Adam, is the fact that we are in a time frame on this because they have a position open. You know, this is something we can't just let linger for a long period of time, but what would be a reasonable time frame for us to come to, you know?
That'd probably be a good question for them more than anything,
Well,
but
we talked about it at the board. Basically, they understood the time frame that we would have to maintain the position with the volunteers on the board doing the job, that they would have to maintain until July. If in fact this worked out.
if the city is going to go with the scenario where the position is either partially or fully a city position, to incorporate it in next year's budget and have it incorporated in our budget for that purposes, you would be talking the end of January. It'd have to be in place by the end of January.
In your financial thing, right?
You know, and that establishes it relative to our budget with July, but let's say we decide no, when you want us, you know that sooner than later,
So you can pursue.
so that you can
So we
pursue
can
it, and, you know,
pursue it.
so that, I think that's more what my question is not, you know, the city's time frame, but your time frame for making a decision with regard to how you want to, you know, go forward. You know,
Well,
you're-
I explained to the board that literally you all really had to make a decision by the end of January. And they all were willing to wait and figure out what happens with that. So we'll go forward after you all have discussed it in your financial meetings and looked at what the options might be. So,
Does Wendy, you guys meet at the end of January?
for your budget.
Well, the budget hearing, I'd have to look at the numbers exactly, but the budget hearing needs to take place at the first meeting in March. It needs to be posted in the paper at least 10 days prior to that, which means you can't use the second meeting in February, which means the first meeting in February
They
needs
have
to be approved budget. So I usually try not to close my window quite so much the second meeting in January. So if the first meeting's the 13th roughly, I think it is, without looking at my calendar, roughly the 27th of January would be probably, I'm not saying that's the dead
Right.
final date, but let's be honest, that's when it needs to be if it's going to happen.
13th and the 27th.
27th. The night of the 27th is when it need to happen.
Merry Christmas,
We
Tracy.
need-
Oh, actually, we see you
See you
tomorrow
tomorrow.
night.
Two.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, because I never did get your call the other day.
Well, any other comments, questions?
So what would the chamber board ideally like to see? Since we seem to have,
The chamber board would like to see this proposal go through. We get a much more qualified person than what we will attract with a 30-hour position with no benefits. So it's very difficult for people to take a job with no benefits, and we just aren't in a position to be able to do that. When I came on the board, they were going in the hole every single year. These last 3 years have been the first time that we haven't gone in the hole. By the end of the year, we were robbing an account till we got the investment fund in January. When we could pay it back, we were going farther and farther in the hole. So we really worked hard to try and keep the costs down to the point where we cover everything with our investment drive and the funds that we get with the city. So it's important to us to stay on that track, but it's getting much more difficult to do that.
And to be fair to Chamber, when you look at our community request and you see it listed on here and you see Chamber Main Street and our allocation from the city, you'll see that in between the year 2006 and 2007, there was a $2,000 increase. That was all associated with a change in the relationship up till the end, Chamber was not paying for utilities at the building. The city made Chamber responsible for the utilities, and as associated with that, the city gave them a bump in their, at least that's the way it's always been indicated to me, how that was kind of brokered. Then from that 7,000, you will see it stayed pretty flat until the 2012 year, and in 2012 year, it increased to about $10,000. And then the 2013 year, it increased to $12,500, which is where we find ourselves today.
Just throwing this out, I'm looking at trying to maximize your donations. Would it be more beneficial for us to continue to give you the 12,500 and basically you subcontract from the city, if we approve this, if you were to subcontract at your 21,000 or 20, back that person, so you would be able to say that, yes, we are paying for a director, we happen to be paying it by coming, rather than actually giving the money to the city. I mean,
The trouble becomes the benefits. The city can
no,
only pay
no,
benefits.
right. Okay, well, see, it would be a city employee that we would employ.
Right.
We
You
would-
say instead of 5,000 or 6,000.
You would be giving, you would
Yeah.
returning basically what you were paying Brandy to the city. So you are looking at you would be contracting his or her services from the city, even though it's a city employee.
That's basically what he's laid out, isn't it?
Right, I guess.
I mean, I'm
It's
not
just,
following
we
what
would
your
just say we
difference is
have more
there, Bruce.
control.
No,
We would actually have
what I'm
control
saying
over
is,
18.
what I'm saying is that we're withdrawing our 12,500. I'm looking at it from an investor's point of view. If you come out and say, this is our budget for our director's cost is basically staying the same as what it was.
$21,000.
21 and plus 5 is probably over 20. I mean, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, as an investor, if I look at it and say, okay, this much money is going toward paying for the cost of the director's services,